When you stop being available, everything changes. Not later, not gradually, immediately. The shift is silent, unmistakable. People start to wonder what's wrong. They ask if you're okay. They say, "You've changed." But you didn't scream. You didn't fight. You didn't explain. You simply stopped showing up the way they expected you to, and that is what breaks their sense of control over you. Because let's be honest, most of your life you've been conditioned to be emotionally accessible, always ready to respond, always ready to help, to explain, to fix, to smooth things over even when you're the one bleeding inside. You were taught that being available is love, that being responsive is kindness, that being there for everyone is what makes you a good person. But here's the truth no one told you. Your constant availability has made you predictable. And everything that becomes predictable eventually becomes a tool. People don't even realize they're doing it. But they begin to use you. They press your emotional buttons to get what they want. They know exactly how to trigger a response, how to pull you in, how to keep you in orbit around their needs. And you keep giving, keep responding, keep sacrificing your peace, your time, your energy, just to keep the connection alive. But the connection isn't real. It's not love. It's not respect. It's dependency on your availability. And the moment you interrupt that pattern, when you don't answer right away, when you don't explain yourself, when you choose to withdraw instead of react, the entire dynamic collapses. Suddenly you become a question mark, an unknown, an absence that makes people uncomfortable because now they can't use your reactions to manage their own emotions. They feel lost without your predictability, but that's not your problem anymore. Because here's what you're starting to realize. You don't owe anyone your immediate reaction. You don't owe them your emotional availability. You don't owe them access to you, especially when that access is being used to manipulate or drain you. Your silence is not weakness. It's power. It's the space where you reclaim yourself. So if people are confused or angry when you go quiet, it's not because you've become cold. It's because they've lost access to the version of you they could control. And now they have to face themselves without using you as the emotional mirror they were so dependent on. And now, here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment you step back, the masks start falling. Not yours. Theirs, because now you're not reacting. You're not giving them what they want. You're not feeding the dynamic that kept them in control. And suddenly, people start to show you who they really are. The ones who claim to care about you, they get irritated. They guilt-trip you. They accuse you of being distant, cold, selfish. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your absence reveals how much they depended on your imbalance. See, emotional manipulators don't always yell or argue. They don't need to. All they need is for you to keep responding, to keep defending, to keep explaining yourself. That's the trap. You think you're being kind, but what you're really doing is handing over your power again and again. Ask yourself, Who gets angry when you say nothing? Who tries to provoke you when you stop engaging? Who panics when you don't justify your boundaries? The answer is simple. The ones who were never really with you. Only with the version of you they could use. They needed your availability to validate themselves, to distract from their own emptiness, to avoid looking in the mirror. And when you stop playing that role, they don't just lose control over you. They're forced to confront their own chaos. And not everyone is ready for that. But here's what's important. Their reaction says nothing about you. And everything about them. Because people who truly respect you. They don't demand explanations for your silence. They don't punish you for setting boundaries. They don't take your no as a personal insult. Only those who benefited from your self-abandonment will treat your healing like a betrayal. So don't fall for the manipulation. Don't rush back just because someone's uncomfortable with your growth. Let them sit with their discomfort. Because in that silence, yours, not theirs, you're finally beginning to see clearly who respects your space and who only respected your sacrifice. You were taught that saying yes makes you a good person, that being available emotionally, physically, mentally is the right thing to do. That love means showing up no matter what it costs you. But here's the truth no one ever told you. Being constantly available isn't a strength. It's a prison. You've been conditioned to believe that your worth depends on how much you give. So you give and give and give until there's nothing left of you but exhaustion and emptiness you can't even explain. How many times have you said yes just to avoid guilt? How many times have you answered messages you didn't want to open? Listened to stories you didn't care about? Stayed in conversations, relationships, spaces, not because you wanted to, but because you didn't want to disappoint anyone? That's not kindness. That's self-abandonment. That's betraying your own peace just to keep the illusion of connection. And the most dangerous part? You've done it for so long that it feels normal. It feels like love. It feels like loyalty. But it's not, because love doesn't ask you to drain yourself. Loyalty doesn't demand your silence. Real connection doesn't come with guilt as a leash around your neck. You've made yourself so emotionally available that people have started to treat your presence like background noise. Always there, always accessible, always ready to fix, help, respond. But here's the cruel irony. The more available you are, the less you are valued. What's always there is rarely appreciated. What's too easy to reach becomes invisible. And what's predictable becomes disposable. They don't see you. They see the function you serve, the emotional role you play, and the moment you stop playing that role, they don't say, "Thank you." They say, "You've changed." But maybe it's time you did. Because constantly showing up for others while disappearing from yourself, that's not noble. It's destructive. So from this moment on, remind yourself of this. You don't owe anyone access to your soul. You don't need to answer out of guilt. You don't have to say yes just to be liked, and you're allowed to disappear without explanation. Your time, your energy, your presence, they are sacred, and it's time you start treating them that way. And now you're starting to see it. You're not tired because you work too much. You're tired because your energy is scattered, wasted, given away to things, people, conversations that don't nourish you at all. Every time you respond to something you didn't need to. Every time you defend yourself against a cheap criticism. Every time you say yes out of fear or guilt or habit. You're leaking energy. Carl Jung called it psychic energy. The life force behind your thoughts, emotions, choices, presence. And here's the hard truth. Most people aren't exhausted because they're weak. They're exhausted because they don't know how to protect that energy. They give it to drama, to noise, to people who never deserved access to it in the first place. Ask yourself, how many nights have you lost sleep over a conversation that never even got resolved? How many hours have you spent replaying arguments in your head, wishing you said something different? How much of your attention goes to people who only show up when they need something? This is your life force being drained. And here's the most dangerous part. It doesn't feel like energy loss in the moment. It feels like you're doing the right thing. It feels like you're being strong, helpful, loyal. But strength isn't about always showing up. It's about knowing where not to show up. Because not everything deserves a reaction. Not everyone deserves your emotional availability. In fact, the people who drain you the most are often the ones who push your buttons with surgical precision. They don't yell. They don't threaten. They just know how to trigger you, so you react without thinking. And every reaction feeds them, gives them control, gives them access to your energy. Jung said, that which you resist persists. The more you fight, argue, defend, prove, the deeper you sink into the trap. Because what you give energy to grows. And when you waste your energy, you don't just feel tired. You become vulnerable, emotionally exposed, easier to manipulate. That's why opportunistic people gravitate toward the emotionally available. They sense who's always trying to explain, to fix, to please. They see it as weakness, and they exploit it. But here's what Jung also taught. A healthy mind is one that keeps energy within the system. That doesn't waste itself on everything that screams for attention. Real strength? It's in knowing when to not engage. It's the quiet discipline of saying no without guilt, of walking away without explanation, of choosing silence without shame. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming wise, selective, sovereign. Because when you start guarding your energy, you stop being a tool in someone else's game and start becoming a force in your own life. Here's something no one tells you. The most dangerous manipulation doesn't shout. It whispers. It shows up in moments when you feel guilty for protecting your peace. When someone says, "You're being distant," and you start wondering if they're right. When someone accuses you of changing, but deep down, all you did was finally start choosing yourself. That's not change. That's liberation. But not everyone benefits from your freedom. You see, the people who secretly depend on your emotional availability, they don't want you. They want the role you play in their story. They want the understanding one, the listener, the fixer, the emotional emergency button they can press anytime they feel anxious, bored, or insecure. They don't love you. They love what you provide. And the moment you stop providing it, they panic, because now they have to sit with the very thing they've been avoiding themselves. Carl Jung called this projection. When someone cannot or will not face their inner shadow, so they place it onto someone else. And if you're always emotionally open, always accessible, always trying to be the good person, you become the perfect canvas for other people's projections. You stop being seen for who you truly are, and start being used as a mirror for what they cannot face. You become the selfish one when you set a boundary, the cold one when you stay silent, the arrogant one when you no longer explain yourself. But here's what they're really saying. You stopped serving my emotional comfort, and now I don't know how to control you. Let that sink in. Because once you stop reacting, something powerful happens. The illusion breaks. They can no longer define you through the lens of their own wounds. They can't guilt you back into submission. They can't provoke a reaction to prove their story about you. And that's terrifying for them, because your silence forces them to hear their own internal noise. Your absence reveals how emotionally dependent they truly were. Your boundary exposes how little they respected you in the first place. That's why they lash out. Not because you're wrong, but because you've become useless to their emotional survival system. And in their eyes, that's unforgivable. But that's not your responsibility to carry anymore, because you're starting to understand something essential. You are not a mirror for other people's shadows. You are not here to absorb guilt, to fix wounds you didn't cause, to shrink yourself so others can feel safe in their illusion. You are here to become whole, to reclaim your energy, to live in truth, even if that truth makes others uncomfortable. So yes, some people will misunderstand your silence. Some will call you cold. Some will walk away. Let them, because the ones who truly see you will never punish you for choosing yourself. And those who do were never seeing you at all, only their own projections, reflected back in a world that screams. Your silence is revolutionary. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to reply, to prove a point, to win an argument, to be right. But here's what almost no one realizes. There's more power in silence than in 1,000 perfect words. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of passivity, but strategic, intentional, lucid silence. The kind of silence that doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've risen above the need to engage. Carl Jung didn't see silence as emptiness. He saw it as the space where truth finally begins to emerge. Because when you stop reacting, you start observing. And when you observe, you start to see things clearly. The emotional loops, the manipulation cycles, the way people pull your energy just to fill their own void. Silence reveals patterns that noise keeps hidden. And this is why your silence makes people uncomfortable. Have you noticed it? How some people panic when you don't explain yourself, when you don't reply right away, when you disappear without warning. It's not because they miss you, it's because your silence takes away something they were addicted to. Narrative control. As long as you're reacting, they still have influence. As long as you're talking, they can twist your words. As long as you're engaging, the emotional game continues. But when you go quiet, the game ends. And for people who live off your emotional reactions, that's terrifying. Because silence forces them to face something they've been running from. Their own inner chaos. See, your availability made it easy for them to avoid themselves. But now you're not playing. You're not explaining. You're not defending. You're simply not there. And in that space, they're left with the one thing they can't control. Their own reflection. True silence isn't withdrawal. It's self-possession. It's the conscious decision to no longer leak energy into battles that aren't worth your peace. It's not coldness. It's clarity. Because maturity doesn't always look like long explanations, deep arguments, or emotional fireworks. Sometimes it's just this: not replying, not showing up, not engaging, because your peace costs more than their attention. Jung taught that real transformation, the process of individuation, requires distancing from the noise of the collective. You can't hear your own voice when you're constantly reacting to the voices of others. And silence is how you find that voice again. But let's be honest. Silence has a price. People will distance themselves. Some will say you've changed. Others will call you arrogant, selfish, cold. Let them. Because what they're really saying is, you stopped letting me drain you. And now I don't know who I am without that power. That's not your burden to carry anymore. Because now, your silence is no longer a reaction. It's a declaration. You are no longer available for anything that costs your peace. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Let that sentence sink in. Because chances are, you've spent most of your life believing the opposite. That you have to justify your silence. That you must explain your absence. That your boundaries need a reason people can understand. But here's the truth. Your peace doesn't need permission. Your no doesn't need an essay. Your healing doesn't need to be approved by anyone. You've been trained since childhood to be available, to respond quickly, to keep others comfortable, even if it means betraying yourself. You've been told that being emotionally accessible makes you kind, that being open and agreeable makes you good, that being understanding is what makes you lovable. But here's what no one said. Being constantly accessible is not kindness. It's a form of self-abandonment. You've become the person who answers texts while exhausted, who listens to other people's problems when you can barely hear your own thoughts, who keeps explaining themselves even when you know they're not listening, even when you feel your energy draining with every word. That's not love. That's fear. Fear of disappointing, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. And manipulative people can smell that fear. They know you'll over-explain. They know you'll say yes to avoid guilt. They know you'll come back even after setting a boundary because you hate being seen as the bad guy. That's not weakness. That's programming. But now, you're rewriting that script. Because here's what emotional maturity sounds like. Not today. I'm not available. That's not my responsibility. And most importantly, silence. And here's the part that shocks them. You don't explain it. Because you don't need to anymore. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed to be liked by everyone. That needed to be constantly understood. That couldn't rest unless everyone else felt okay. You're not here to be convenient. You're here to be whole. And that kind of wholeness, that kind of emotional sovereignty, threatens people who only knew how to relate to your sacrifice. Because they weren't used to the version of you that says no without guilt, or that walks away without giving them closure, or that stops explaining every single choice, feeling, decision. And here's where it gets real. They'll say you're selfish. They'll call you distant. They'll say you're not the same anymore. And you know what? They're right. You're not the same. Because now you're protecting your peace instead of proving your worth. You're choosing your energy over their comfort. You're finally realizing that the people who truly care about you will never demand that you betray yourself to prove it. So no, you don't need to justify your silence. Your silence explains itself. It says, I'm no longer available for emotional chaos. I'm no longer reacting on demand. I'm no longer explaining myself to people who never really listened anyway. And that kind of clarity, that's power. That's not coldness. That's self-respect. Because the moment you stop justifying your boundaries, you stop negotiating your value. And the moment you stop being available to everyone, you finally become truly valuable. To the only person who matters in this process. You. So, what happens next? What comes after the silence? After the distance? After you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop being available? First comes the loneliness, and not just the physical kind, but the emotional kind, the aching kind, that uncomfortable emptiness that shows up when the noise stops, when the people fade, when you sit alone in a quiet room and wonder, did I go too far? Did I lose something important? Am I becoming someone cold? It's tempting, so tempting, to go back, to pick up the phone, to explain again, to apologize for setting boundaries you had every right to set. But stay where you are. Sit with it. Don't run. Because that loneliness you're feeling, it isn't punishment. It's a clearing, a sacred pause, a spiritual detox. Carl Jung wrote that in order to become who you truly are, you must separate from the collective. You must walk alone for a while. And that's exactly what you're doing. Not running away from the world, but finally returning to yourself. Because in the space where the world's expectations once lived, there's now room for something deeper. Clarity, presence, power. The longer you stay in the silence, the more it begins to shift. What once felt empty now starts to feel peaceful. You notice it in your body, less tension, more breath. You feel it in your mind, less noise, more clarity. You sense it in your spirit, less reaching, more being. And then something miraculous begins to happen. You stop missing people who never truly saw you. You stop longing for conversations that were one-sided. You stop craving spaces where you had to shrink just to belong, because now you belong to yourself. And this is the beginning of individuation. The slow, powerful process of becoming whole. Not the version of you shaped by people's opinions, needs, and projections, but the version that was buried underneath it all. The version of you that doesn't beg for understanding, that doesn't need approval to breathe, that doesn't seek connection at the cost of self-betrayal. You're stepping into the most important relationship of your life, the one with your own soul. And yes, it's quiet. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, it will cost you some people, some habits, some parts of your identity. But what you gain in return is priceless. The ability to trust your own intuition, the strength to say no without guilt, the clarity to see manipulation for what it is, the peace that comes from no longer performing for love. So if you're here in that silence, don't rush out of it. Don't fill it with noise. Don't try to be okay too soon. Let the silence work on you. Let it heal. Let it reveal. Let it rebuild. Because this isn't the end of anything. This is your rebirth. You are not becoming less. You are becoming more of who you truly are. Whole, centered, untouchable. So what comes after the loneliness? What happens when the silence has done its work? Something powerful. Something most people never reach. Because they give up too soon. What comes next is rebirth. You rise, not as the version of you shaped by guilt, people-pleasing, or fear, but as someone who has walked through fire and come out clear. Clear on who you are. Clear on what you will no longer accept. Clear on the price of your energy and the pricelessness of your peace. You don't chase anymore. You attract. You don't prove your worth. You embody it. You don't explain your absence. You let your absence speak for itself, and people will notice. Some will fall away, confused, offended, bitter. Let them. Others will feel your shift and try to pull you back into the old patterns. Ignore them, because the ones who truly see you will rise to meet you at your new level. Not everyone will understand this new version of you. And that's okay. You didn't come here to be understood. You came here to be free. And freedom, real freedom, comes with a cost. You will be misunderstood. You will be called selfish. You will walk alone for a while. But in that walk, you will find something no one else can give you. Yourself, your groundedness, your inner calm, your intuitive knowing, your sense of enoughness. That is the solitude of the strong, not the loneliness of the lost, but the radiant clarity of someone who no longer trades their soul for connection. From now on, you are no longer available for emotional crumbs. You are no longer a puppet for other people's chaos. You are no longer playing roles that cost you your truth. You are whole. You are rare. You are sovereign. And that rarity, it will make some people uncomfortable, because nothing is more threatening than a person who has learned to belong fully to themselves. But it's also what makes you unforgettable. If this message resonated with you, if you feel like this is where you are or where you want to be, then this space is for you. This is exactly why I created Soul of the Mind. To give you the tools, clarity, and depth to walk this journey with strength and awareness. So if you're ready to protect your energy, to set boundaries without guilt, to reclaim the parts of yourself that the world tried to silence, subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. More truth, more depth, more silence that heals. Let's walk this path together. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be undeniably yourself. And if you made it this far, you already are.